Alright everyone, it's time for Occult Literature, video number 374, the Apocryphal Books of the Old and New Testament. This is an important one, 127 pages, so it's an intermediate read. Link in the description to my edition of this work on Amazon. Second and third links are to my books blogs. I'm really going through a lot of things that relate to Judaism and Christianity lately, mainly because I'm trying to make a compilation of religious history that deals with that topic sometime next year. So I wanted a little bit more meat on the bones there, because I looked and I said, well, I've got plenty of Kabbalah, but I don't really have quite so much on this side of things, so let's get through a few more titles. This is an excellent work, and it goes through the entire Apocrypha. That is works like the Book of Jubilees. Some of them are more well-known. Book of Jubilees, Book of Enoch, that's been repopularized in the modern sense, mainly by ancient astronaut theorists, actually. The Infancy Gospel of Thomas and some of these others, the Gospel of Nicodemus, they're more well-known. Some of these works are fairly popular, or at least they've been analyzed more. Then you get a lot of the shorter or even fragmentary works that are much less well-known. Like, most people have heard of the Book of Jubilees, I'm assuming, or similar works. You almost certainly heard of the Book of Enoch. Have you heard of the Book of Judith? Not quite as many people. Not quite as many people. Maccabees would probably be one of the more popular ones. But Bel and the Dragon, fairly short work. It deals actually with the destruction of the Canaanites' idol, I believe. They had this lizard, actually, that they fed people to and sacrificed to and claimed it was a god, and Daniel killed it with poison. Interesting works all around. Now, the actual analysis of this work. First, it points out the basic structure and content. It attempts to define authorship and date, generally speaking, although for some works it doesn't even bother. Goes through them. Sometimes we don't know the date. Often it's a date range. Like, you can establish based on, if you know the date of one work, and you know the other work is borrowing from it, quite clearly plagiarizes a canonical gospel or something, you can establish at the very least the oldest date it could be at. You may not be able to establish when it was written, but there's a cutoff point there that you can establish based on the accepted anthropological and religious timeline. Not all of the surmisings here are technically correct according to modern analysis. This was made over 100 years ago. This is before the Dead Sea Scrolls were found. A great deal of additional literary content that can be, in some cases, more positively dated has been found, certainly after this book was written. But it is an interesting look at the Apocrypha, and it covers all of the basic ones. Again, it speaks at some length of the Book of Enoch, the Book of Jubilees, the Gospel of Nicodemus, and some of these other important works, and also establishes the fact, and this is well known, if you studied religious history, some of these works at one time were considered canonical or semi-canonical, or they were considered non-canonical, but they weren't heretical enough to prevent them from being read in a church. And so early Christianity is a hodgepodge, especially, although some of these are technically, they're much older than that. They simply got absorbed by the primitive Christians in some cases. You have a situation where you have a vast corpus of literature. And then later on, in very Roman style, it gets standardized, and often other works get directly suppressed. So you wouldn't expect the Infancy Gospel of Thomas, with Romanism being what it was, you wouldn't have expected that to be in the Bible. By the way, the Bible's not a book. The Bible is a compilation of different texts. You wouldn't expect to see the Book of Tobit within it, which is, I've edited it. The Book of Tobit is, I think, my favorite work of the Apocrypha, because you have, I believe, Asmodeus, it is, demon possessing individuals and getting driven out with a fish gallbladder, actually. A poultice is made of that, and somehow demons, I guess they don't like gall, so it worked. Foul smells. It's like, go back to hell, it smells better, I suppose. Very, very interesting work. And again, the number of different texts that it speaks about, and again, sometimes able to establish authorship, sometimes not, is vast. It's both Old and New Testament. I feel like sometimes people watched the History Channel special on the Apocrypha, and I think they only covered like 8 of the different books. So you got very little mention of many of these particular different gospels, different books, different manuscripts, you only really heard about the major ones. But there are so many of these smaller or more minor ones, like the letters between, was it Seneca and Paul, I believe it was, which is spurious. We can be established that those are latter day. Those didn't actually involve Paul, but it is interesting. It was at one time considered by some people to be important for religious purposes, but many people don't even know such works actually exist. Again, link in the description of my edition of this work on Amazon. Second and third links to my books, blogs, highly recommended if you're into religious history, especially with regards to Judaism or Christianity. That's about all. Peace out.